Hello everyone and welcome to my presentation. So today I'm going to be introducing you to my research topic and give you some background on the subject, explain why I'm interested in this type of research and how I propose to conduct my research. So let's get started. So just to introduce myself, my name is Sarah and I'm a mom of 3 wonderful children. I had 2 of my children before I finished high school and I had my 3rd while I was in university. After I had my first daughter, I transferred to an alternative school called UVille. It's an alternative school here in Ottawa for teen mothers. While at UVille, I met many other teen mothers and I realized how similar many of our experiences were, both leading up to our pregnancies and also life with children as a teen parent. I now work at a shelter and resource center for teen mothers, and I continue to see how many of these young women and their children struggle to find adequate resources within the community. Low-income teen mothers are a very vulnerable population that I feel have gone unnoticed within our city. I decided that I was interested in this research while I was still in college. And going into university, I knew that this was always going to be my focus, to work with teen mothers. My goal has always been to find some way to bring attention to the unique needs that they have and the issues that they face. So this leads me to my research question. How do low-income teen mothers aged 15 to 20 years old living in Ottawa engage with social services and resources? The resources I will be focusing on are Ontario Works, subsidized daycare centers, housing, food banks, shelters, schools, drop-in centers, and healthcare centers. So I consider myself as an insider to this group because I was a teen mother. I was living off of Ontario Works. I went to all the teen mother support centers in Ottawa. I have lived in low-income housing and I'm familiar with almost all of the subsidized housing areas. I'm an outsider because I'm no longer a teenager, I am not currently accessing services available, and most importantly, I am white. Race is extremely important when I'm collaborating with the participants and analyzing my data. While doing my research, I will also have to be aware of how my own experience may interfere with what I may be looking for in my research. My experience with many resources in Ottawa were not always positive, so I don't want to be looking for things that reconfirm that for myself. I am also an outsider because I currently work in a resource center, which may create some mistrust and impact the power dynamic, which could interfere obviously with my data collection. Research in this area of study has typically been quantitative and prevention focused. Researchers have been interested in finding the underlying determinants and or causes of teen pregnancy in order to take preventative action to eliminate this social problem. Unfortunately, the focus of the research being on reducing rates actually supports stigmatization, marginalization, and lack of supports for these mothers. I'm not denying that teen pregnancy typically occurs within vulnerable populations, but I believe meaningful research would create an inclusive space of knowledge transfer between researcher and the population being discussed. Teen mothers and their children have unique needs, and to meet those needs, we need to collaborate together. So my goal is to move away from the traditional sexist and anti-poverty lens that this field has historically used and approach this research through a post-structuralist feminist lens. Feminist post-structuralists perceive this subject as being socially constructed and define the subjectivity as encompassing the unconscious and conscious thoughts and emotions of the individual, or their sense of self and how they relate to the world. This approach is important to my research because it is my belief that the power of the social realm has constructed and systematically oppressed this population as a form of punishment for breaching social regulations. Not only have discourses positioned this population in the margins of society, but the power of these discourses exists in language, thought, relationships, images, and policy. So let's go over some of the history that influences discourses of teen motherhood, and let's discuss what motherhood looks like today. Within North America, the ways we have socially constructed motherhood has changed in many ways over the last 50 years. Although ideas surrounding motherhood have transformed, there remains unspoken rules regarding who gets to be a mother and which children get celebrated. Teen motherhood is a unique phenomenon that has plagued the conscience of society as far back as we can look. To understand the social structures, policies, and values that make up the Canadian identity, it's important to understand the tactics used to colonize this land. When Europeans came to North America, they brought with them Christianity. Christianity has been one of the most significant tools used by Europeans to justify murder, gain ownership of this country, and violently assimilate Indigenous peoples. Although this was centuries ago, this laid the foundation for our current political system. The Christian religion created a social code that allowed for easy interpretation through simplified binaries of moral and immoral, and was seen as a way of keeping social order. The key to social order was believed to be the nuclear family. So that's one cisgendered man and one cisgendered woman, together with 2.5 children. The Bible believes that the nuclear family is the natural order, a theory that has later been supported by theories of gender, developmental psychologists, and the state. The Christian foundation of this country is extremely important and relevant because every resource center in Ottawa for teen mothers was originally founded by nuns. Although they may not currently operate as a religious service center, many of the donors are Christian, and that influences how which programs get run and the delivery of the services. So to understand the experience of this group, I also believe it's important to understand discourses of girlhood. Discourses of girlhood are interesting because they tend to stretch across many cultures. Girlhood is perceived as a time of innocence, becoming, and vulnerability. Because girlhood has these discourses of becoming and vulnerability, they're viewed as at risk and in need of constant surveillance and policing. So girls' bodies, we see the state governing their bodies significantly, even on a social level. So I believe that teen pregnancy is so condemned, I guess, because teen pregnancy becomes like a visible representation of how power systems have failed to protect girlhood. So research done by Butte and Motavani discussed how in recent years teen pregnancy has been problematized by policymakers. So we have all heard sort of the stereotype of the welfare mom, and that is actually developed and upheld, I guess, by the state in many ways, which is unfortunate. So in the 1970s, teen motherhood was beginning to be framed as a drain on the system, and stereotypes of the welfare mom were emerging. At that time, Statistics Canada began collecting and disseminating data on teen pregnancy in 1974. Mary Brenhe discusses how economic discourses paint these young mothers as a financial burden, and policymakers identify teen motherhood as a symptom of a failing society. Smith-Battle describes the welfare mom stereotype as unmotivated, irresponsible, and incompetent. These stereotypes are found throughout Western society and are reproduced through discourses. So in my literature review, I found that 95% of teen mothers in Canada live below the poverty line. That makes social services and resources extremely important for this population. But as discussed so far, this population faces unacceptable judgment within these spaces. The goal of my study is to collect qualitative data from low-income teen mothers within Ottawa to hear from them what their experiences have been in these spaces. The goal of this is to help educate service providers and social service students entering the field. The first step to creating change is raising awareness to a social issue, and I hope to bring this issue to the attention of many to reduce the stigmatization and improve existing services. To try and answer my question, I'm choosing to collect my data through a qualitative method using focus groups. I would like to select my participants through a snowball sample technique and facilitate 3 groups of 5 to 8 participants. I would like to facilitate the focus groups in public libraries, allowing their children to come if need be. I will provide drinks, a lunch, and bus fare. I will be audio recording my focus groups and only taking brief notes of key themes that I hear emerging through discussions. I will plan my focus groups to run for 2 hours, but I will book the room for 3 just in case the conversation naturally runs longer. So my sample will be mothers aged 15 to 20 years old who currently live in Ottawa and have lived in Ottawa since their pregnancy. The participant must currently have at least 1 child living below the poverty line, which is $31,000 a year, and have access to at least 1 social service or resource center since having their child. Though those are the only requirements I'm looking for in this study. I chose a sample because I believe low-income mothers who are between the ages of 15 to 20 years old have a very unique experience, and they can teach us a lot about what they need and what they have gone through and possibly what they wish was different. I chose not to include any mothers younger than 15 years old because I believe their experience as mothers seeking social supports and resources is different. So it deserves to study all on its own simply because of parental rights and living situations below the age of 15. That experience, yeah. After this session has ran, I will transcribe the audio recordings. The research process argues qualitative research is supposed to contextualize a situation or tell a story about the topic. The idea is to provide a holistic account of the phenomenon or social problem. To tell the story and the experience of these young moms is what I aim to do. I believe there is a problem in how services in Ottawa are delivered to this population, and I hope to provide insight into this issue by sharing the accounts of these young moms. So as mentioned before, I have decided to find my participants through a snowball sampling technique. This would allow me to connect to teen moms that I have never met before. Believe it or not, teen moms in Ottawa is a pretty connected group. Somehow we all tend to know each other or be connected to each other in some way, and through snowball sampling I will be able to maybe meet moms who are on the lower end of what I'm looking for, and also connect with mothers who maybe don't access resources as often. I think it's important to get a look at everyone. I don't want my research to be skewed to people who frequently access centers. So I have chosen focus groups as my method because by creating a small circle of women, I hope to create a little community, something I very often see these mothers struggle to find. I feel when you experience judgment in so many spaces, when you meet people with similar experiences, you feel a bit stronger. The focus groups may help eliminate some of the power dynamics between myself as the facilitator and the participants. These women share many of the same spaces within society and access many of the same services. Therefore, it's important for me to see quickly emerging themes throughout the discussion, which is also why I have chosen focus groups. By all of the participants being in a room together within these focus groups, I feel like we will all be able to work as a team and collaborate in a really meaningful way. I feel like by leading focus groups as well as the facilitator, I will be able to let go of a lot of control, which is really what I do want, because I just want to be doing the listening for the most part. And at the end of the research, I hope that they feel it's just as much theirs as it is mine, because I feel like this project could really benefit them and create real change within Ottawa. Some ethical concerns I need to think about moving forward with this research are harms and benefits of this type of research, consent, privacy, and power dynamics, which I have mentioned already a little bit. So my intentions with this research are obviously to benefit the individuals and the programs we have in the city, but there may be some negative impacts that I have to prepare myself for and prepare the participants for. So some of the negative impacts could be, but are not limited to, the participants feeling stressed, overwhelmed, or emotional, speaking about or hearing about certain topics and content. A harm that sometimes occurs from research with vulnerable populations can be that your research supports or confirms certain beliefs about the population, which can actually be used to further stigmatize the group. That is not something I have a lot of control over, but it is something I can do my best to avoid. Since I have chosen focus groups as my research method, I also have to be aware of how that impacts the participants' privacy. Within my research, I will ask the participants to create a pseudonym for themselves to protect their privacy, but since they are all in a room together, that there is some privacy concerns, of course, because people are sharing their experiences with multiple people in the room. So we will have to include this on the consent form. As far as consent goes, I will have a thorough consent form that details the purpose of my research and how the information will be used. I will also include any potential harms and information to free mental health services, like mental health service lines and centers that they can access if they feel they need it. Lastly, I have mentioned power dynamics a bit throughout this presentation. Since I am both an outsider and an insider to this group, I will need to keep that in mind during all my interactions and how I transcribe my own research. While transcribing my work, I feel like I would like to incorporate my identity and emotions into my work, as I feel that would both strengthen my research and create some clarity to the content. In the end, I would like all participants to be given a draft of the research before it's printed as a final copy. That is something I really want to do with this. That's something that's very important to me. I believe the youth I will be working with are co-producers of knowledge, and I believe they have rights to edit what they have said and review how I have framed it. I don't want anything taken out of context. Many times people can say things and it's perceived in a way it was not meant, so it's very important for me for them to review the work that I've done. I wouldn't want to print a final draft without their approval. I believe this is an anti-colonial and feminist research decision, and I look forward to hearing from my supervisor with her perspective on this. Now that all is said and done, I have 3 questions from my peers to help me move forward in my research. So the first question is, do you think focus groups has too many privacy concerns? Do you think interviews would be more meaningful to this research? This is something I have been torn about for a few months now. I just don't know which research design would help me address. I just need to make sure that I am choosing a research design which will help me address my social problem the best way possible. So second question is, can you think of some good icebreakers? Can you help me think of an activity that could warm everyone up? And 3, have you ever had any biases towards a certain group? And what helped you open up to seeing things differently? Alright, so that is all, and thank you very much for listening for this whole presentation, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.